how would you describe your relationship with directors over the years?
I had one wonderful relationship.
Wow.
No, you know, I've had good directors.
Right.
I've had directors who were so bad.
Mm.
And I remember on Good Times, Norman had hired a director, and I came to him and said, "We've got to fire him." He said, "I just signed him for next year." But I was doing a movie when I was under contract at Columbia, and Ray Stark had a movie he wanted. And the director was to be Bob Butler. He's a wonderful director. And Bob came to me and said, "They're not going to make this movie. So let's do the way we would do it, the best we possibly can." And we spent weeks talking about it. It was about freestyle skiing, of which I knew absolutely zilch. He fed me in. He showed me film. He showed me, we can do this, we can do that. I wrote a very good script with him. And they, of course, would not make it because it was a property against which the producer could charge his ski trips. That was the best experience I ever had with a director, truly. He was creative, he was supportive. If you have the same director, as I did on the 5 shows of Faulty Towers, which was called Amanda's, we got along wonderfully well. He was a former comic, former actor. He understood. If he had a problem, he came to me. On other shows, I had directors whose whole life modus was to be mischievous as possible. Say the cast doesn't like the script, or go down and say the writers don't want to touch it, you know, and whatever his purpose was an agony. But Howard Storm was fine. Did a couple of television movies where British director did one of my 2-hour television movies, Backdoor Pilot. Met me in the street. He said, "What a pleasure to do your words." I said, "You screwed every one of them. You didn't understand a word of it." Because there was very little give and take. You know, my belief is that you sit down with the director and you say, "This is what we're doing. How do you think?" A wonderful writer named Lorenzo Semple Jr. did a movie on a Tom McGain novel. And Lorenzo was wonderful. And he flew to Michigan where they were filming it, and he saw a scene. And the director, who was a wonderful guy, came out and said, "What do you think?" He said, "I never thought anything like that." The director said, "Oh, well, that's the way I saw it." And Lorenzo got back on the plane and went home. Because if you don't know, if you don't have a unified vision, it doesn't mean that the director can't get, quote, creative. But people used to say to me, "Oh, what does it matter if they change a word?" Okay. Hamlet, will you avenge your father? No. You're on, you do the rest of it. It's only a word. I said, understand that most writers in this business, and I believe this, arrive at what they put on the page with some painstaking work. And the thing that that actor has said, "I got a better idea," is when you threw out your Frank Chase, the best story I'd heard in years, when he was doing The Sopranos. David Chase, rather. Frank Chase was network. One of the actors said, "I don't think my character would say this." And David said, "What makes you believe it's your character?" And that's a lot of it.
Do you feel that the director needs to be completely in sync with you or do you feel that once you have a talk that he can or she can, as you said, be creative?
I think in agreement with me.
Right.
or at least question me, or at least tell me what he or she wants to do, or don't have surprises tucked away. You know, wouldn't it be great if Hamlet had a skateboard? Yeah, but it's a little idiosyncratic, and maybe we shouldn't do it. I don't mind creativity. I love it. Understand, I don't believe the director is my enemy.
Right.
I don't believe that I am his enemy. I remember way back in the days of craft in New York, I'd written a play, and by some mistake, they said I could come to the reading, and the director said, take your pen and draw a line through all of those, the video, because we used to say two shot, we want to say, and a wonderful New York actor named William Redfield stood up and said, I think the writer put them there for a reason, and I think we should hear them. I respected actors. As a matter of fact, I went to the neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater, so I would understand what actors go through. And I said, I will never write lines that actors can't say. Doesn't matter. They said, I can't say that. I respect, I'll tell you, people who knocked me out. Lucille Ball just staggered me. I'd done a show with her, and we were in rehearsal, and she came and said, if you cut my line here and my line here, the joke is going to work much better. And I said, I don't remember a lot of other stars saying that.
Right.
B. Arthur, who was wonderful, and came to me and said, I love what you've written. I just love it. But I know you can do better. She was right. Those people were grand. Fred Allen was a magnificent editor. Well, I'll tell you a story about Lafayette. We had a show with Jack Benny as the only guest. And the structure of the show was Jack not knowing what the hell was going on. And the members of the cast saying, don't worry, when you see the girls and the waterfall, everything's going to be wonderful. And just rushing him from one, and he kept saying, what girls, what waterfall? Now the purpose of the entire show was at the very end to have water come pouring down on him. When we finished the script, we didn't put that in. When we read it, it's kind of no ending. And Jack said, fellas, it can't end like this. You have to soak me. Because he knew.
Right.
And we said, really? So Fred Allen was a magnificent editor. Boom, make things better. Actors who are really counting their lines. I love Jimmy Walker. Not the I think he was a dreadful actor, but he came to the first reading knowing every line. I love that. One of the questions I saw on the list was about an agent, and what kind of an agent you should have. And this may sound naive, but I said one you like. I'm very fortunate. I had an agent at IFA, and one day he came to me and said, you know, this agency isn't doing for you what it should do. You need a manager. I said, oh? He became my manager. He was my friend. He is producing my play. So I believe that kind of synergy is important. Someone you like and is good at what he does. I used to believe that a good agent was one who would wake you up in the morning, say, here's your orange juice, here's your coffee. That's not necessarily it. I had an agent for many years, 17 years, and when I left him, I went to another agency. He represented packages, and my new agent was negotiating for me against him, and he asked for a price, and the old agent said, well, who would pay him that kind of money? And my wife said, that's probably how we represented you all those years. So I know it's a difficult thing to ask for, honesty. Don't crap me. Tell me. And appreciate me. Because I will appreciate you. And be my friend. We don't have to go to dinner every night, but be my friend. You know, I used to start off doing a joke. I said, 2 years ago, I found out my agent retired 8 years ago.
Yeah. Slightly different subject.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about the Writers Guild, and since you've been so involved over the years,
Yeah.
you don't have to tell us about the founding of it, but
No,
just,
I wasn't here.
right, but about your feelings about it and how you've been involved and how you feel other writers might.
I love my guild.
Yes.
Before I came out here, I was in New York, and I said I was writing the Imogene Coca show. The show went on the air, and within a very few weeks we were rerunning because it was personal tragedies, so forth and so on. The network did not want to pay the writers, saying, it's an act of God. And Writers Guild East wrote them a letter, and they paid us. And I knew then I had to pay something back. In my time out here, I spent 12 years on the board. I was vice president. The two things that I wish I had accomplished. One, when I was vice president, David Rentels was president, we wanted to heal the gap between right, east, and west, and worked very hard at it, and really did not succeed. And I think that's something I feel very sad somewhat, because I believe there should be one guild. The other was when I was on my last negotiating committee, I said, I'm willing, I tried to push this to the other negotiators, and I said, never mind residuals, never mind anything. At that time, my wife's series, which had been off the air for about 4 or 5 years, was playing everywhere. And no one, not an actor, not a writer, was getting a penny because they'd all been paid out. And I said, the formula for us should be, we get 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%. Remember, we once had 4% in perpetuity, and then we almost went on strike to give it back. I said, however a show is produced, wherever, whenever, whatever, I don't care what the technology is, we get a piece. There's nothing, I mean, you don't have to bother with anything else. I could not convince the other members of the committee. The basic answer was, they won't give it to you. And my basic answer is, they won't give us anything. And it may be a strike that'll last a year. And maybe I can afford to stay out for a year. Not everyone can. But I felt this would be the bedrock or the beginning of a level of negotiation that would carry us through forever. Because at that time, there was no YouTube, there was no internet, there was, and I was not prescient. I didn't know any of this was coming back. But I did have, at one time, an agent at William Morris who put in a contract in flight. I said, that's ridiculous. But shows were shown. I think the Guild is marvelous. I think it's sometimes misunderstood. I think at times it has shocked me, utterly shocked me. I was called by a writer to be, and his attorney, Bob Schiller, and I were called to be expert witnesses on this writer against Universal. And sitting at Universal's table was a WGA attorney as a friend of them. And I was stunned. However, we did get the writer a $10 million settlement.
Wow.
Yeah. But by and large, I think it is quite clear that they are here for the writer. they understand it, they work hard for it. The things that have accumulated to writers is marvelous. And without it, look, we have out there a management who at the drop of a hat will wipe out residuals, want to very much, and we have a wall between us, and it is the Writers Guild.
Tell us a little bit about your style of working. You know, writers, especially writers who come to the library, are always interested in how other writers work. What would you say is your usual way of working in terms of do you have a home office? Do you have a favorite chair? Do you have do you write longhand, or are you?
I always have an office, either outside the home or in the home. So I go away from where I live to a place where I work. My MO has been, if I'm working on an original, not assignment, because assignment is, and not a series when I was doing series television, that's set. But I'm working on an original, and I have the luxury of time. I spend time thinking, not writing. I really will think about a thing for months and months and months, as long as I don't have to do it. And then I'll start taking notes. And I no longer make up 150 little cards. I don't do that. I just do pages, and then I start writing, not knowing where it's going, vaguely knowing where it's going, and see where it takes me. I have one other set principle, which is when I decide I'm finished for the day, I'll write one more sentence, maybe half a sentence, and leave it. So I come back to a problem, something that is not resolved. And generally, and this is also a trick of not working, is I will go back to the very beginning the next day and go all the way through to where I must be. And,
You're not someone who cleans his whole house before you start writing or whatever.
Bob Van Scoyk and I once wrote an article for Weekly Variety, how to keep from writing. You know, first you sharpen all the pencils, then you realize they're too short. You go out and buy some more pencils, and then we trim your beard. You don't have a beard? Sit down, grow a beard. We'll see you in a few weeks. You know, we all have, and hope the phone rings. And someone says, they're having a cat throwing contest. Oh, we can do that. Waldo Salt, who was my friend and my mentor, we were all living on the beach, and he wanted to move further up the beach. And he said, do you want to take over my lease? And we said, yes, we'd like to. And he said, let me give you one piece of advice. Don't write facing the ocean. I was on assignment. I finished it. I showed it to Waldo, and he said, you were facing the ocean.
Is there something that you have always wanted to do, a story you've always wanted to tell that you have not done yet?
Yes, there is a story. I did it in A form, and it was so screwed up by the studio. I recall running into Larry Gelbart one night, and he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing a film for Belushi and Aykroyd. And he just looked at me and said, they'll break your heart, because he had just finished one with them. I wanted to do, and I may still get back to it, a story about that combines two wonderful pieces. One is Lieutenant Kiji, the Russian story, and the other is the Thurber, greatest man in the world. It's a very cynical story. The Kiji story, there's a war going on, there are no heroes. The emperor, the Tsar, says, I need a hero. He gets a military communique that is screwed up. He said, bring Lieutenant Kiji to me. There is no Lieutenant Kiji. And in the opera of Lieutenant Kiji, they ride in the two guards with a horse without a rider, and that's Kiji, and they make him the hero of the war. In Thurber's Greatest Man in the World, it's this absolute snot who flies a little flivver plane, if you remember Douglas Wrongway Corrigan, across the Atlantic and comes back a national hero, and he is a pig. He wants money, he wants girls, he wants this, and the decision is, well, the end of it is, the Secretary of State pushes him out the window. I wrote the story for Metro and United Artists, and the opening scene was auditioning Hollywood songwriters to write a hit song for the war. Because if you remember, Vietnam had no hit songs, Iraq has no hit songs, Afghanistan has no hit songs. And finding this hero, bringing him back and touring the country, and then deciding a dead hero is even greater than a living hero, and trying to kill him. Very cynical story. I did a lousy script. I did a terrible script because kept getting feed from the studio. And then it was interesting because after they stopped the project, rightfully so, the producer said, I wrote another treatment. And the producer loved it. It was closer to what I wanted to do. And he said, I can get this set up. And MGM said, you can't have it. So, but those two elements, with some humor, something I've always wanted to do. Not always, but when I was very young, what I wanted to do was a Broadway review that everything in it would offend some aspect of some dearly held belief of the audience, and by the time the curtain came down, there'd be no one in the theater. And the producer said to me, oh, that's a good financial risk. But the movie was one that I dearly wanted to do. What do I think about those courses? I think they are destructive, that there must be a major event by page 12. Certainly ruins George Bernard Shaw as a writer. I think that anything that says you do here and you do there, and it's not what it's about. Unless what you're sitting down to write is a major cataclysmic event that happens in 12 minutes. No, I think anything that narrows the scope of the imagination is not to be nurtured. Now, if your aim in life is, I suppose, to get your start by selling that script, you may follow the formula. But if it becomes the formula, I have the luxurious position of saying no, but I believe it's bad.
So you're kind of saying that you would start with a piece of original material and not with trying to write a television series that's already on, an episode of a show that's
if you want to
already
write, you have an idea for a half-hour series. Write it.
What do you think the qualities are that someone needs to become a writer?
Well, we accept talent and let that go by the boards. I think it's fortitude. I think it's the ability, courage. You know what I consider great courage in a writer? The young man who wrote Little Miss Sunshine. It was his first script. He sold it. They began to tchotchke around with it. He took it back and got it made his way. So it's belief in what you do. I felt that was so wonderful. So wonderful. I think it is a belief in what you do, the courage to carry through, vision, and the willingness to get kicked in the ass.